Hey guys, Mount Olive, everybody else, glad to see you today. I'm going to continue our daily devotion. This week we've been looking at the story of Abraham and Isaac, and every time we study this or look at this story, it just blows my mind. The type of man that Abraham was and how willing he was to be fully obedient to God. So we're going to have a short devotion today. Everybody's done a great job of this week. Really enjoyed this study as usual. So hopefully get a little bit of something out of this today as we continue to go through the study. So share my screen here. We'll get started. Our devotion today is going to kind of look at two different sections: divine provision in a couple of verses, and then obedience brings greater blessing in a few verses. And we'll be looking at Genesis chapter 22, verses 13 through 18. So as we get started here today, let's be reminded that the theme of this week's devotion is experiencing God through complete obedience. Experiencing God through complete obedience. And man, what a question that is. Are we willing to completely and fully be obedient to what God is asking us to do? And this, of all other stories, many examples, but this is an amazing example of someone who is willing to be fully and completely obedient. So let's read the scriptures for today. Verses 13 and 14 said this: And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. Verse 14, and Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And so obviously what we have here, I won't go back and recap the whole story, but we've gotten to the point to where Abraham is ready and willing and in the process of getting ready to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice. And he's to the point to where he's going to go through with it. And it says he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a ram caught in the thicket. So what we see here is the divine provision that God in this moment sends a sacrifice to be put in place of Isaac, of Abraham's son. And it makes me think here that, just like Isaac was about to be the sacrifice, we got to remember we were about to be the sacrifice and should have been the sacrifice. We deserve to be the sacrifice for our sins, and God sent not a ram, right, but a lamb to be the sacrifice in our place. The Bible tells us that we deserve, because of our sin, we deserve death. That should be what we get because of our sin. And I mean, let's just think about that just for a minute. Just like this ram stepped in and was sent by God to take the place of Isaac, God sent that lamb, his son, his one and only son, Jesus, to take our place on the cross. And so I want to stop just for a minute and explain, if you're listening today and you don't understand, what is this guy talking about where somebody stepped in and was a sacrifice for me? I want to just take a minute and tell you what I mean. From the time that Adam and Eve committed the first sin in the garden, and if you've never read it, just open up Genesis and read in the Bible about Adam and Eve. From the time that they first sinned, when Eve took a bite of an apple, even though she knew she wasn't supposed to, went against God's word and made a mistake, just like we all have, and sinned. From that time, everyone from that point forward was born into this world into sin. We are imperfect, right? And we've all continued to make mistakes. We have all sinned. The Bible tells us that we've all sinned and we fall short of the glory of God. And so what I mean here is that what we deserve is death. What we deserve is an eternity to go to hell when we die. And so what I'd like to tell you is that instead of getting that fate, instead of getting that what we deserve, we can now, because Jesus took our place and died on the cross, we can now have an eternity in heaven with him. So no matter what you've done, no matter how bad you think you've messed up, Jesus has already taken care of that sin that you've committed, whether it's past or whether it's present or what you're going to do, that sin has been taken care of when he sent his son to die on the cross for me and for you. Now, all it takes is for you to not only just believe that, but to confess your sins, to say with your words, yes, I'm a sinner. Yes, I've messed up. I understand that. God, please forgive me of those sins. I accept Jesus. I accept that sacrifice that you sent for me. And I want to ask him into my life, and I want to make him Lord of my life. Please forgive me of my sins. I want to live for you. When you do that, you have then signed your ticket. You have then accepted that Jesus took your place and that now you are his and you're going to serve him and that you'll have an eternity in heaven with him. And so I just wanted to pause. Sometimes I think that we don't take enough time to explain what it means to be saved. It's a simple thing, but we have to take the time to explain it and make sure people understand. So let's continue on here. So looking at the next few verses, this is kind of gets into our next part of the devotion. Verse 15, and the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of the heaven the second time and said, by myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, in blessing I will bless thee, multiplying I will multiply thee. Let's wait right here just for a second. Let's back up to this verse here in 16. It says, for because thou hast done this thing and hast not withheld thy son, right? So the angel of the Lord or God is speaking to Abraham and saying, hey, because you were willing to be fully obedient to God, because you did not withhold what was most important to you. You didn't withhold something of great value. You didn't withhold your son. You were willing to go through with what God had asked you to do. Because of that, here's what I have for you, right? And so whenever John did his devotion yesterday, he was talking about what did Abraham get out of this, and he mentioned he was, there was something that I would cover today, that what did Abraham get out of this. So let's look at this next verse. It'll tell us what Abraham is going to get out of this. Verse 17 says, remember, because you gave up your son, this is what you get. That in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. Now there's a lot of stars and there's a lot of sand on the beach, right? So a great amount of blessing on Abraham because of what he's done here. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So because you're willing to be obedient to me, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to multiply you. I'm going to continue to allow you to be blessed, on and on. Huge blessing from God. So why was he blessed? Because thou hast obeyed my voice, it says. And so what's cool about this, if we think about it, this is not the first time that this has been said to Abraham, right? And so if we look back at Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 4, this would have been many years before. It'll tell us how long it's been right here in just a second. Let's look. It says, now the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house into a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curse thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. Sounds familiar, right? So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And so if we think about this, Abraham hears this from God then. He's 75 years old. Now we know that when he had Isaac, he was around 100 years old, right? So that would have put it, there's 25 years. And then, according to what you believe, and John touched on this too, he could have been, Isaac could have been from 15 years old to 30 some years old when he was, when Abraham was willing to offer him as a sacrifice, as God had asked. So that puts us If he was 75 there, he could have been between 115, 130 years old when he was ready to sacrifice Isaac, which means this promise from God came 40 to 60 years earlier, right? And so, that just shows what a faithful and sovereign God we serve, right? You can't tell me that God isn't true to his promises. 40, 50, 60 years prior to Abraham offering his son as a sacrifice, being willing to, he had promised that he would bless him for being obedient, and he continues to say that even in what we've covered this week as well. So, what are some takeaways for today? So, God sent Jesus to take our place as a sacrifice on the cross, just like God sent the ram to take Isaac's place on the altar. Right? Let's remember that today. What we deserved was death, but God sent his one and only Son to take our place on that cross. And we need to be thankful for that today. And if you haven't accepted that today, it's time to do that, right? I encourage you to do that. Secondly, Abraham withheld nothing from God. And so I'd like to ask, what might you be withholding from God today? Right? He was willing to do everything fully in full obedience to God. What is it that we might just be hanging on to and we just aren't quite ready to fully let go of whatever that is? Let it go today. This is a great story of why should we not withhold from God? Why should we be fully obedient to God's ask of us? And it's because he will continue to bless us richly, right? He will continue to bless us if we're willing to be fully obedient to him. And then thirdly, because Abraham obeyed God's voice, he received great blessing from God. Are you fully obeying God's voice today? So, I hope you get something out of that. There's so many things and so many directions we can go in that devotion in these scriptures, but my goodness, God was willing to give his son as our sacrifice, just like he sent that ram for Isaac in Isaac's place. Abraham was willing to not withhold anything. He was fully obedient to God, and because of that, what a great blessing God promised him and followed through for Abraham and his family and all the people that were alongside him for his life. So I think God has great blessing for you today if you're willing to be obedient to him. So hope you guys have a great day. Hope to see you in church tomorrow. Everybody, please continue to be safe. Continue to pray for our country, for our community, for our leaders, for our pastors, for our ministers, that we just continue to try to be obedient to God and his ask of us in spreading the gospel. I love you guys, and I hope to see you soon. Have a great day today.